Good morning and welcome to Peace Out, where I'm learning right this second to peace out. Technical issues. Boy, that'll try to sap your peace right out on it. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. I couldn't get it was all up, but I couldn't get the description in there, and that's required. It was like not letting me click the mouse on that field, and I was like, well, I guess I go to my phone. That poses a whole different set of problems. So technology is great when it works, right? Well, anyway, good morning. What a perfect exercise to see if I can let God's peace reign, even when I'm frustrated with the computer, right? Oh yeah, sure. God's peace still reigns. Yeah, it just takes a second to go, oh yeah, it's right here. Matter of fact, we're going to talk about that this morning. We're going to talk about that process that we're in of learning every day how to just let His peace reign in our hearts. It's not a button to push. That would be nice, but then we wouldn't get stronger. Because I hope over this 3.5 years, we've gotten stronger in God's peace, that we've gotten faster at going, oh yeah, His peace is still here. Doesn't mean His peace doesn't mean there's an absence of a struggle. His peace doesn't mean there's an absence of difficulties. His peace doesn't mean there's an absence of problems and situations that have to be dealt with. It just means that in the middle of those problems, we can still have His peace. And Paul's a good example of that, actually. And I was reading First Thessalonians this morning. I'm reading the New Testament through. So by the time I see you again, I'll be in Timothy, right, on Monday, because tomorrow should be Second Thessalonians. Sometimes I get excited and read ahead because I'm like, this is so good, right? So this morning it was in First Thessalonians, and listen to this. Paul tells us in chapter 2. He says, um, "We were spitefully treated at Philippi." That doesn't sound very nice, right? "As you know, we were bold in our God to speak to you the gospel of God in much conflict." There's not an absence of conflict. It's in the middle of conflict. We can still have God's peace. How do I know that? Because the dude that wrote this also wrote over here in verse 1, chapter 1, in the first verse, actually in his greeting, "Grace to you and peace from God. And yet we came to you in much conflict." And you know what? The same guy finished this book with, oh, let me get on the right page here. It finished it with, "Now may the God of peace Himself sanctify you completely." Right. So he's saying we've still got that vein, that connection to the God of peace, even in the middle of conflict. And he kind of demonstrated that here. But see, we can go, if you read the book of Acts, you'll see Paul's story where he was beaten for nothing, where he was stoned one time, and they left him there because they thought he was dead, and he got up and traveled. The dude had to be sore after that, right? I mean, they left him there for dead, and the disciples came and prayed for him and prayed around him, and he got up and went to the next city, right? And so he went through some stuff. One of the people I used to work with in ministry a lot called it having blood on his testimony, right? And don't isn't it comforting sometimes when you talk to somebody who has been through some stuff and still has God's peace, has been through some difficulties and still trusts God? That can be so rewarding just to hear their stories. And I mean, that's what books are made out of, right? And so Paul is in the middle of this conflict, and yet he's talking about the God of peace and how God can give peace in the middle of the storm, right? In the middle of the conflict. All of our stories have conflict. That's what makes life interesting. As a matter of fact, you don't watch a movie or read a book that there's not a conflict. It's a major element of a story without it you wouldn't even have a good story. Who reads a book? Who reads? Even Hallmark movies have conflict, right? Even those kind of movies have conflict, because without the conflict, there's not a good plot. It's like, okay, so what are you solving here? Or what did you overcome here? We want to know how people overcame, right? And we want to know how they beat that conflict, or how they managed to navigate through that conflict. That's the whole point. And so we're reading Paul here, and we're looking at how he can preach peace even though he lived a life with lots of conflict. Not conflict in the sense of arguing with God and not being at peace with himself or with God, but he had a lot of elements coming at him, a lot of stuff in his story that, and yet in the middle of all of that, he was still saying he's still the God of peace. May that God of peace give you peace and joy in believing, right? We look at Second Corinthians 12, and he has a whole list of stuff he went through. Yet that same man in the middle of conflict, right here in Colossians, I believe we read this one yesterday, Colossians 3, he tells us to let the peace of God rule in your heart, Colossians 3:15, right? And yet he wrote most of these letters in the middle of some sort of conflict, right? And then we hold on to Philippians 4 a lot, right? Be anxious for nothing and everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving. Let your requests be made known unto God, and then the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, we're not going to be able to comprehend it. Will guard His peace will guard our hearts and minds. It doesn't make conflict go away. It doesn't make everything be perfect. It's just that in the middle of it, in the middle of the conflict, in the middle of the storm, in the middle of the struggle, whatever you're facing right now, you can still have God's peace. His peace doesn't go to a certain limit and go, oh, I can't go in there. It's too rough for me to handle right now. No, God just extends that peace and goes, go ahead, let it rain. Right there in the middle of the trouble, let it rain. Right there, we can go back and say, we can liken it to our salvation. Our salvation doesn't leak out. Neither does God's peace. We have a choice to believe that Christ became our righteousness and nailed sin to the cross, and now we stand righteous and holy before a righteous and holy God because of what Jesus did, not something we did other than believing in Him, right? And that salvation is sure, and so is everything God gave us, like His peace. It's sure. God doesn't get up and rank, oh, this is too hard. I have a friend, I haven't talked to him in a long time, and if I start, he said, how are things? I'm like, they're good. I thought he really wanted to know. Well, they're good. Chris has this one little problem. Oh, I gotta go. Like, really, it wasn't even a negative statement. I don't dwell on the negative, in case you hadn't noticed that. For the most part, I don't dwell on those kind of things anyway. But if there was even a hint of something that he didn't want to hear, he just had to go. And I'm like, well, okay, so I got it. Just don't ever say anything negative. Don't ever say anything, don't share what your day is really like. Just tell him, oh, yes, all is good in love and war. Right? We've got peace, So it doesn't mean that there's no conflict, that we don't see what's going on around us. It just means that smack dab in the middle of whatever's going on, no matter how good it is, no matter how bad it is, God's peace remains. There's no limits on it. He doesn't say, I can't handle that situation. I don't know how you're going to have peace there, because I'm just going to stand over here and watch and see if you can figure it out, because I don't want to touch that, or I don't want to go in that situation, or I'm trying to avoid that kind of story. No, we have God's peace smack dab in the middle of our conflicts, smack dab in the middle of our stories, smack dab in the middle of our struggles. And we look at Paul's life and go, wow, he wrote all these verses we're memorizing about peace in the middle of his struggle. There's got to be some real stuff in there somewhere, right? There is a way to peace out in the middle of the warfare, in the middle of the struggle, in the middle of whatever's going on in your story right now. God's peace is still interwoven into that story. Let it rain today over the noise of the story. Let it rain today over the hardest part of the struggle. You can still have His peace, because He's that strong. He's that cool. That's why we can peace out. Peace out, you guys. Have a great day. I'll see you bright and early Monday morning. Have a good weekend. Go Pokes.